This video is for process costing. We are going to cover an example where we have a manufacturer, a bakery. They produce homogeneous goods like bread or rolls, and they have three WIP departments. Remember, one of the key changes from job order costing to process costing was that we moved from jobs to a homogeneous product like fuel, steel, or food products. We are going to be looking at data provided by the processing department, so we're focused on this WIP department. You've been given the following information, and we are going to prepare a production cost report using a 4-step template that I've provided. This template will help us get to the point where at the end here we can journalize a journal entry to move the amounts we need to from the processing department to the baking department. Let's first start by remembering that this is a useless information alert. We don't need to know the beginning WIP, how much it's complete. We care about what has been completed. We started the month with 200 units in process, and now we have added 700,000 more in April. So we have 900,000 units in play. You'll see at the end of the month that we transferred out. By the end of the month, we transferred out 600,000 units to baking, and we have 300,000 units remaining. You'll notice that we have 900,000 accounts, or 900,000 units that we have accounted for. We do care about the direct materials being 90% complete and conversion being 15% complete because we will need to calculate equivalent units. I'd like to make note here that these are 100% complete as related to direct materials, and for conversion, they're 100% complete. How do we know they're 100% complete for direct materials and conversion costs? Because they've been transferred to baking. We wouldn't transfer them to baking unless they were complete within our WIP department. As we come down the document, you'll notice that we have costs from direct materials and conversion that we brought in from last month. These are our beginning WIP dollar values. And we have costs that were introduced in the manufacturing environment. These are our production costs for this processing department in the month of April. Let's remember that the terminology conversion costs, we combine direct labor and manufacturing overhead. So these two items here are our conversion costs. So if I were to look at the total costs in April, we had beginning balance and WIP of 150, and we added 300. Conversion costs, we started with 50, and we added 300,000. Now, let's get started on our template. If you come to our template, you'll notice that you have step 1, step 2, as shown here. We're going to do equivalent units. And then down here you can fill in materials, conversion, just to give it another subheader, and this will be total. Here we're going to come up with some unit costs, and then we'll work down through the problem until we get to our journal entry. So if we come back, we started the month with 200,000 units, and we introduced 700,000 new units. So here in step 1, we're just accounting for the actual units that are in play. You'll notice that we have 900,000 units. Now down here, when we account for them at the end of the month, we had 600,000 units that we transferred out, and we had 300,000 units that we still had in WIP that are partially complete. You'll remember that they are 90% complete on the direct materials side and 50% complete on the conversion side, these 300,000 units. From here, what we need to do is we need to create the equivalent units. You'll remember in the example in the PowerPoint slides, there was an example regarding full-time equivalent students. And we had full-time students and we had part-time students. We needed to know how much a part-time student took on average. That example connects over here because we know the percentages that are complete in direct materials, and we know the percentages that are complete pertaining to conversion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create equivalent units. For the ones that were completed and transferred out, they are 100% complete. Why? Because they were transferred out of the department. Same goes for conversion costs for these transferred out units. I'm going to say 600,000 times 100%, and I have 600,000. The work in process is a different story. I'm going to need to come back and remember that for direct materials, I'm 90% complete. I'm going to take 300,000 times 90. And for the conversion side, I'm going to take 300,000 times 50. 50%. So I'll come back here, 300,000 times 0.50 and 300,000, excuse me, I made a mistake there. 300,000 times 0.90 because we're talking about materials, and 300,000 times 50% for our conversion costs. Now here, if I total up the 600,000 and the 270,000 units, it gives me the equivalent units for each cost as shown here. So for materials, I have 870,000 equivalent units, and for conversion, I have 750,000 equivalent units. Now, I'm going to actually bring this data, and I'm going to bring it right down here, because in this step 3, we need to know equivalent units. Well, we just calculated it. For materials, our equivalent units was 870,000, and for conversion costs, or for the conversion side, we had 750,000 equivalent units. Now, here, costs in April, you'll remember that we need to examine the costs that we started with and that we introduced. So for direct materials, we are going to take 150,000 plus 300,000, 150,000 plus 300,000. And on the conversion side, we are going to take 50,000 plus 100,000 plus 200,000. Again, this is our conversion costs, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. So I'll take 50 plus 100 plus 200. Now, if I total up these costs, you'll see that I have $800,000. Now, if I come back over here and I added the 200,000 plus the 600,000 here, that gives me the $800,000. We've accounted for all the costs here. Now, I'm going to put a dark gray shade area here because we do not need to put anything in this cell. What we're going to do on the unit costs, A divided by B over here, is we're going to take 450,000 divided by 870,000. I'm going to bring it out to 5 decimal points. And then I'm going to take 350,000 divided by 750,000. And this 47 is going to be our conversion unit cost and our materials unit cost. Now, it's key that you follow me here. This is a common mistake on the exam, is we need to add these together. We don't do a new calculation here. We're just adding these two components together, just like we did here. And this is a dead cell. Now, what does this tell us? This tells us that materials for this month cost us 51 cents, 51.517 cents for materials for each equivalent unit. It tells us here that for conversion costs, it costs us about 46 cents, 0.466 for the conversion cost per equivalent unit. Remember, in step 2, we calculated our equivalent units for materials and conversion. Okay, down here, all we're going to do is somewhat of a reconciliation of the costs. You'll say that we have 800,000 here. I'll shade it. Let's see here. I'll also shade this cell. And then here, what was our work in process? Dollars. And how do I know it's dollars? Because it says costs. At April 1, my costs were $200,000 plus 150,000 plus 50,000, 200,000. And we started into production. These costs, direct materials, direct labor, manufacturing overhead, we had 300,000 plus 100,000 plus 200,000. I think I've got one too many zeros here. For $600,000, I add these together, and you'll see that I tie from here to here. Does this equal this? It does. False. What did I do? Let me try that again. Does this cell equal this cell? It's going to say true. We've accounted for all of our costs in our unit cost calculation as shown here. Our fourth and final step is for us to find the dollar values transferred out. We know how many units transferred out, 600,000 units transferred out. The question is, how many dollars transferred out when those 600,000 moved on to the next department? You'll remember from the problem, we're working on the processing department, and 600,000 units have moved to the baking department. Again, we know 600,000 units have moved to the baking department, but what we need to know is the dollar value associated with those units. That's why we're doing this report. Now, transferred out. We transferred out 600,000 units. So I'm going to take 600,000 units times my total unit cost per equivalent unit. And you'll see that that comes to $593.45. For materials, I'm going to take 270,000 times 51 cents. If you're asking me why didn't you use 870, the answer is we've already accounted for these 600,000 here in the transferred out dollars. So what's the formula for this one more time? 270 times the 51 cents. And the conversion costs, we are going to say $150,000 of, or 150,000 units work in process times the 46 cents. If I total those up, 209,655. Now I'm going to total up the dollars that were transferred out and the WIP balance that I have remaining in work in process. $800,000. Have we accounted for all of our costs in what the dollars that we've transferred out and the dollars that are in WIP, we have these all tie. 800,000, 800,000, 800,000. Now, we get to our journal entry. We are going to move these dollars from the processing department to the baking department. So I'm going to put my journal entry as 04/31/2014. I'm going to debit WIP baking, and I'm going to credit WIP processing because I've transferred dollars to a new WIP department for these completed units. Now, the debit is the 59345. And if I make a note to this journal entry, it would be to transfer the associated dollars from WIP processing to WIP baking for the 600,000 transferred units. This is the dollar value that was transferred out into the next department. The reason why we do this production cost report for the processing department is so that we can come up with the dollar value to transfer to the next department and ultimately to finished goods after it's gone through all of our WIP departments.